Marciarose.
I like that. Thank you. What an audience. I think this is a record number of people. And it's all because of Channel 3, right? I'm really delighted to be here to help with the celebration of the 80th anniversary of Channel 3. 80 sounds like a lot, but it really was feels like almost yesterday. And I was really very complimented when Jerry Wilkinson came over to me and asked me to do this, and he said that he thought that I was the perfect choice to preside over this today. And then I suddenly realized that was because he assumed that I was there in 1932 when it all started. Straightened him out. But it did start in June of 1932, and at that point there was very little programming to be seen besides test patterns, and the only audience really were the engineers who were working on the project at the time. And there was a brilliant technician who was head of the project, who had the most delicious name of Philo. Who knows it? Philo Farnsworth. Is that wonderful? How did you know that? I got all of my research from Jerry, who is a walking archivist. So there was very little programming being done through the 40s because of the war. But in 1942, they launched the first network national soap opera. And it was done on the whole network. And the whole network was New York, Washington, Philadelphia, and Schenectady. And at that time, there was no Channel 6, and there was no Channel 10. And while we're talking about the longevity of Channel 3, I thought it might be fun to touch on just a little bit of the trivia of those days. First of all, it was always Channel 3. But it wasn't always the same call letters. There have been 4 call letters. The first ones were, let's see if you know it. Does anybody know it? W3X, he gets an extra mug. Then it was WPTZ, and then it was WRCV, and many of us worked at WRCV. How many of you worked? Right. Oh, is that long ago? And then finally in 1965, it became KYW as a result of a swap between Cleveland and Philadelphia through a very complicated consent decree. Now, as late as 1950, KYW, Channel 3, signed on at 10 o'clock in the morning and signed off before 11, except on Fridays when I'm told they did the Friday night fights. And the first time that there was an across-the-board newscast was when WCAU presented John Facenda, and that was in 1952. And the other stations followed really pretty quickly because they discovered that it was a good moneymaker. My recollection of hearing the stories, only hearing the stories, was that when the newscast first was done, it was only 15 minutes. Can Jerry corroborate that? Is that true? It was only a 15-minute newscast. But enough of ancient history. We are here today to hear from 10 outstanding television broadcasters, and they are going to reminisce about their days at Channel 3, and hopefully we'll finish before the 6 o'clock news. So, you heard me mention a few minutes ago, I mentioned that first network soap opera. And it was done in 1942. And at the time, an actress by the name of Betty Kellner Davis starred in the show in 1942, and she is with us today. Do I see her?
Hi. I never thought that in 1942, when I said sure to a gentleman from WPTC, or no, from Philco. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Let me know if I'm not coming across, but I do have kind of a gravel-gurdy voice. Okay. I'll try. But I have never forgotten many of the impressions that I received about 70 years ago when I first learned about television as an actuality. It was late 1941 when I was halfway through my senior year at the University of Pennsylvania. I belonged to the Penn Players, the dramatic club of Penn, not Mask and Wig. One day, a gentleman from Philco appeared at the campus office and asked if anyone was interested in appearing on television. This was Ernest Walling, who was to be the director. I figured I had nothing to lose and all to gain, so I said, sure. What is it all about? Briefly, Philco had been developing the know-how and equipment to photograph and forward transmit televised images to receiving equipment in special locations. The concept was to add pictures to the sound of radio. They and the world were not ready to receive this home by home, but instead only at public gathering places, such as bars and clubs, were the first locales to have a TV. Television at the home came soon after, but sets needed to be designed and marketed first. Wrestling and boxing matches were the often televised, readily available, and they had an audience. A Philco Science read the news, which was sponsored by Etude, the music magazine. His British accent added real pizzazz. Radio soap operas had been around for some years, and Claire Wallace had been writing a number of them, and she was very good. Radio soap operas had been around, and somehow a popular writer, Claire Wallace, responded to a request that she also do one for TV. This one was titled Last Year's Nest, and I was cast as the mother and wife of a rather typical family with a daughter and a son, both ready to fly the nest, and a rather stodgy businessman husband. This gave Claire Wallace the characters to be developed over an unspecified length of time. We managed some other productions along with the weekly episodes, such as a mystery play and a propaganda play preaching about recycling newspapers. War had come in December 1941. Philco told us, television has gone to war. Material and stock supplies were needed for the war effort. I believe that these staged television episodes were broadcast only about a year. Now, sets and costumes. Each week when we appeared at the Philco plant, I believe we would go to the third floor of the plant at C and Tioga Streets. I traveled there on the Frankfurt L from West Philadelphia and to a designated office area where a studio had been arranged. As I remember, there was a working area where a camera and a designated place in the center of a largish room to permit the camera and its operator to be able to move freely in the center between two open areas. The open areas could be furnished with our necessary backdrop props and turn and furnishings to make stage settings for the actors about to take place. Whenever possible, the backdrops were painted in monochrome. Outside these areas was a small room with a couple of chairs and a TV set on which a person could watch the action. I never saw me or anyone else in action. There was no copy of the broadcast, and although I kept my scripts, these were unfortunately lost in a move a year or so later. When we arrived at the Philco studio, we were presented with a script and started work on what was expected and needed. It read through the script, rehearsed the action, lined up the sound effects, changed costumes. Well, we weren't always sure what we were supposed to wear, but we sort of wore something that was in character with our character. Makeup? We appeared on television in our own street clothes, and we wore what was most appropriate. For black and white television, makeup was specially prepared: brown rouge, brown lipstick, brown eyebrow pencil, brown eyeliner, etc., all in brown, and it was ugly. And we did our own makeup with a little help from a willing and able person. After a brief rehearsal, it would be broadcast time. Ready, action, go. One time, the telephone didn't ring when it was my turn to answer the phone. So I had to do that kind of thing that many people have had to do on the stage, is make up something. We were often rewarded with a trip to the hot shop for hamburgers and milkshakes after our performances, and occasionally given a token for our transportation home. Compensation was a small Philco radio, which I had for many, many years, and a big thank you. The early days of television, we thought it was great.
We think she's great. What an innocent time. A hamburger and a milkshake, not a visit to the bars. Terrific. All right. Our next remembrancer is Trudy Haynes. And in 1965, there was an explosion in the newsroom, and this bombshell from Detroit arrived in our midst. She was cute, she was perky, she was the first African-American television news person in this market. And she really very quickly caught on with the city she didn't know, and names she didn't know, and people she didn't know. And she was a news reporter for many years, and then am I too close? And then in later years, she became the entertainment reporter for Channel 3. Trudy retired in 1998 after, count them, 33 years at Channel 3. I mean, an amazing and awesome record. I don't know that anybody has or could match that. But she's still working. She has her own production company, and she has a television show that appears now on the Bounce Network. Trudy?
Thank you very much. Marciarose was the only icon that I knew in television, or got to know, and so I thank you very much for those lovely words. I came today not to bore you with what happened to bring me to this point, but to thank the people who helped to bring me to this point. So I'd like those people to stand up. the technical staff that worked with me at KYW. Would you stand up, please? I can't remember everyone's name. These are the folks that put me on the screen and helped me get through it. Orion, you cheated, because I'll get to your department in just a moment. I'd like to also thank the talent that I worked with close to, including Marciarose. Would you stand up, please? And I'd like to thank you. Stand up. Stand up, Dick, stand up. And, come on, Weather. Come on. I'd also like to thank the people behind the scenes, like Joanne Calabria and Peggy Giordano. Oh, you're not going to stand up, chicken. They're still there. And I forgot one category, I think. Oh, Orion, you stand up for talent. Okay. But, you know, without these people, it wasn't going to be possible, because when I came on the scene, I didn't have anyone to emanate or to follow or to get advice from, because I was there out by myself. It wasn't easy, but we made it because of these people that have just stood up. And I want to thank them, and to thank you, and to thank KYW. And most of all, I'd like to thank this organization, which has meant a lot to me, for coming back from time to time to renew old favorites and friendships, to see the people that I did work with, to be able to thank them. And it's just been a very good blessing. Right now, I am doing my own show on a station called Bounce. It is a new network. It was started back about 3 years ago by Martin Luther King III and Andrew Young in Atlanta. It is now across the nation and in Philadelphia. Their headquarters now opening next week in Cherry Hill. I've been on the station now for 10 weeks. I do a half-hour show on every Tuesday and Thursday evenings at 7:30 p.m. I'd like to thank Mike Nice. I just looked in his face. And Dory, we worked not on the same station, but you were very kind to me. Thank you so much. So thank you very much for all of your goodness, for all of your blessings, and keep up the good work, and it's good to see all of you. Thank you.
That's Trudy, who is as gracious today as she was when she first came to the station, and it was not an easy time for Trudy. She was the second woman in the newsroom. I don't know who the first was. And the guys didn't give her an easy time. They were resentful of the fact that she was making more money than they were, and the station was lavishing more attention on her than they were. But she persevered, and she was terrific, and she has my admiration tenfold, Trudy. I want to introduce you now to somebody else, whom you know very well, Tom Lamaine. Tom Lamaine was a dashing Navy fighter pilot when he came to, well, he finished doing that, and then he came to KYW in 1970, and he very quickly became one of the most trusted weathercasters in the area. And he retired from the station just this past May, after all that time with Channel 3. But he now is doing what he has described as his dream job. He is the arena voice of the Sixers, Tom Lamaine.
Who knew all they had to do was hire me and they'd have a successful season? Who knew? But as my wife says, I'm back in sports and I'm going backwards. And I said, that's always better than going nowhere. I have gotten away with it for 80 years. I really have. And when I say that, I mean it. I have never sent out an audition tape. I have never mailed in or even prepared a resume. Who can get away with that stuff? And it's true. My first job in Philadelphia, of course, was Flag Day, which was last week in 1970. I was on WIP. And that was only because the program director at that time heard me on the beach in Wildwood. Thank God the station reached Wildwood, because I was in Atlantic City. And as an air personality on WIP, once in a while we would be asked to help with telethons, you know, answer the phones. And at one March of Dimes telethon I was doing at Channel 17, they had two guests coming in from the St. Louis Cardinals and the Philadelphia Phillies. Jerry Royce of the Cardinals and the producer of the telethon, and Tim McCarver. And the producer of the telethon said, does anybody in here know anything about these two guys? Because we don't want to embarrass them. They've given up their time. As a matter of fact, they showed up in their uniforms because they were playing baseball that night. And I said, yeah, I know who they are. Oh, please. I did the interview. After the telethon, general manager at Channel 17 called me into his office and said, we just signed a big contract with the 76ers. We already have Bill Campbell as, I said, that's all you need. And they said, well, we need a broadcast partner for Bill. Would you be interested? I said, yo, are you kidding? And that was really, again, no resume, no audition tape. I just was there. Timing is everything. And from then I got the anchoring, sports anchoring job. Believe it or not, all 38 of my years, except one in television, were at Channel 3. And which means I do go back to the gracious Trudy Haynes. And before Vince Leonard retired, I got a chance to sit alongside of him and do the sports. And, you know, when it comes to Vince Leonard, it doesn't get any better than that. Or Trudy Haynes. And that really lasted until one day in 1979, I think it was. Bill Whitty was doing the weather at Channel 3 and was missioned to go follow a hurricane down in Miami, Florida. Well, the hurricane all of a sudden became a threat to the East Coast, and the news director at the time felt that we should have a weather presence on the 11 o'clock news, but our weather guy was in Miami. I had just done the 6 o'clock sports when the news director came in and said, we need you to do the 11 o'clock weather. And I said, oh yeah, right. And I said, what makes you think I can do the weather? Well, you're a Navy pilot, and, you know, that makes you the most qualified person in the whole building. Now, don't get me wrong. I wear my wings proudly as a United States aviator. But I said, that's all military. Oh, no problem. And back then, Joe Whitty was doing his own forecast. There was no pick up the telephone, call AccuWeather and say, what do you want us to say on the air? Or call the National Weather Service, for that matter. So I walk into this little cubicle of a room, and those of you who were there at the time remember how small this was, but they had all kinds of facts charts and everything up there, and I'm going, some of this stuff is familiar to me, but hey, it's your dime. If you want me to do the weather at 11, I'm your homie. So I did that was 79, and between 79 and 84, I did a little bit of both, weather, sports. Also had the full-time job at WIP with my good friend Tom Moran. And I was also doing 76ers basketball. You know, when you're young and hungry, you take every darn job that comes along. And in 1984, the new management at Channel 3 decided they wanted to make a decision here. Are you going to do sports or are you going to do weather? I said, what do you want me to do? Well, we really need you to do weather. And I'll talk to my agent, first of all, if that's how badly you need me to do the weather. But at the time, and this was a change in broadcasting, which continues today, this helped me make my decision. I heard a news director say, you know, ESPN is on the air now. I don't think the local sports guy really needs 5 minutes, getting 6 on the weekends. And, you know, I saw not only the diminishing returns of sports, but the increased interest in weather. Hello? What part of the newscast affects everybody? But And I said, well, I'll work out the deal, but there's one condition. After having done 10 or so more years of sports, how is anybody watching me going to believe what I am saying as far as a forecast goes? He's a jock. What does he know about weather? So at the time, Westinghouse owned, one of the many owners of Channel 3, the frequency, had a further education program that if you wanted to go back to college, they would pay on this basis. If you maintained a 3-point GPA, they would pay 100% of your tuition. And I said, well, I really would like to see if Drexel was at that time was the only one that was offering a degree in atmospheric science. They don't do it anymore. Matter of fact, I think I got the last degree there before they changed the curriculum. So they accepted my, believe it or not, Bachelor of Arts degree from Fordham University, and I went right into the science program. And Drexel had a program where if you maintained a 3-point GPA, you would be able to get your degree on an accelerated basis. And as you know, in broadcasting, you have to do everything on an accelerated basis. So I had two incentives for going back to Drexel and get my degree in atmospheric science. And that completed in 1986. I got my degree. Oh, and I made sure that Channel 3 filmed it and saw me walking through the university city with my books and everything, man. I'm back in college because I needed some street cred if I'm going to go on the air and do some weather. And that I did until, as Marcia reminded me, I retired a couple of years ago. And I thought I was retired until the 76ers called me and said, hey, you want to come back? And, I mention this as a tribute to all the technicians who I've ever worked with. I did news, weather, and sports at Channel 3. The only thing I never did and I never could do was the technical job. Cameramen who made you look very good, technical staff, producers, desk assistants, all the floor managers, including Diane right there, who has worked with me many years, all made me look so good that, as I mentioned at the top, I got away with it. I've been getting away with it ever since. And in I retired on Memorial Day. I turned in my request sheet for Memorial Day vacation, but a month before that, I had worked out a deal with CBS, really. They were in their younger, cheaper mood, and they offered me a buyout, and I said, I'll take that yesterday. And I said, I'll leave tomorrow. And the news director said, well, can you stay through the May book? Oh, the May book. Oh, my God, so important, almost as important as November. And I said, sure, but I had already turned in my vacation request sheet for Memorial Day. And so I went to the assistant news director, who was in charge, Caesar, who was in charge of the vacations at that time, and I said, can I have my request sheet back for, why, aren't you going? Oh, yeah, I'm going, but I ain't coming back. So where it says, when are you returning? I crossed out the date like it was like June 1st or something. I crossed it out and put never. I don't think anybody ever did that. As a matter of fact, Caesar hung that up on his wall at the station, and I wear that as a proud badge. But I never, I really, because I've been getting away with it all these years, I can't think of any bad times I've ever had. I just wonder how I did those jobs. I mean, I was broadcasting a Sixers game from Seattle or Portland or Los Angeles. And the next day I was back on the air at WIP at 1 in the afternoon, and I realized how, back then we didn't have chartered planes. The teams flew regular scheduled airlines. And Bill Campbell likes to mention the fact that we broadcast the worst season of any major team in 1972-73. The Sixers won 9 and lost 73. But Bill is quick to point out that I did all 73 games because one weekend his daughter was getting married and he missed one of those losses. So I have the 9 and 73, which 10 years later was well compensated because I was still doing sports, and the 76ers rewarded me with a championship ring in 1985 when we swept the Lakers in 4 games. Again, I got away with it. And so when they asked me to come back, when the new owners came in and said, we'd like you to rejoin the 76ers, we know you're not doing anything. I said, well, I was kind of hanging out on the beach and having a good time. So as I did with Channel 3, the only thing I never did was the technical end. Now with the 76ers, the only thing I've never done is play for them. But when they had that 9 and 73 year, the coach was looking over at me saying, yo, is it possible we can put some sneaks on and get out there and play? I just want to thank everybody who has ever had a part in my career in broadcasting. I'm still in broadcasting, believe another one of my retired jobs. In Atlantic City, the new owners of a group of stations down there and said, hey, you know that Memory Lane show you did some time ago? Want to do it again? And again, my wife says, you're going backwards. But it's all good. It's the era of broadcasting. And, one of the things I got away with, and I know you wouldn't get away with it several years ago, but now since just 2 companies own all the stations in Philadelphia, you could get away with it now. But when I was doing Flyers post-game highlights on Channel 29, and on the same night I was doing Channel 3 Sports. Fortunately, they were half a block away. I signed off on Channel 29, a live show, Flyers highlights, went on the air 20 minutes later on Channel 3 and did a live sportscast. And don't forget, 29 and 3 were not owned by the same people. In addition, when I first started to do the 76er games, they were simulcast on 1210. And at that time, my first job at WIP was in the evening. So when are the Sixer games? In the evening on 1210, while the guy who was filling in for me was on WIP at 6:10 a.m. You couldn't get away with it. Now you can, because they're both owned by the same company. But back then, just to show you how fortunate I was to be able to fit all those little jobs in one full day, makes me, thanks to broadcasting, one of the most luckiest guys in the world. And I thank the broadcast pioneers for continuing to help me get away with it and to continue having functions like this that we have this afternoon. Thank you all very much. Thank
you. Can you hear me with this microphone? No. Let me try. This one doesn't work for me? I don't know why. Okay. I'm going to do the silly thing, and I'm going to say, if you can't hear me, put up your hands. Of course, if you can't hear me, you can't put up your hands. But in any case, our next presenter is Dick Sheeran. I hope you can all stay, because there's some terrific people coming up. Dick Sheeran joined Channel 3 in 1973 after he'd done a 5-year stint on KYW News Radio. And he very rapidly became one of Philadelphia's best known and most appreciated feature reporters. In the 70s, when there was all that terrible business about oil, he became KYW's energy warden. And he retired. He also served as New Jersey bureau chief. He retired from Channel 3 about 8 years ago. He's been teaching at Temple University, and he just brought out a new book. And in the great tradition of talk show hosts, let me hold it up, and it's called Newshound. And it's available on Kindle and Amazon, and from Dick Sheeran.
Well, after an intro like that, if I had any class, I'd drop dead. As I look around the room, a lot of us had 30-year careers. But at one point, we had a lot of managers, news directors, general managers going in and out of the place. And we had an expression: if the boss calls, get his name. My favorite story involves my wife, who is a Gracie Allen type person. Go back to 79, Jimmy Carter's in the White House. Now first, let me give a little preview first. I live in Atlantic City now. I grew up in Philly. And we have a very famous sub shop. They call them hoagies here. That I grew up with hoagies, but it's called the White House Sub Shop. Many of you might know it. Hey, all right. The special is very good. Anyway, Carter's in the White House. 1979, the Iranians are holding our hostages. He's inviting reporters from around the country to come and interview him at the White House, because he obviously couldn't go out and campaign against Reagan, who he was running against that year. So I was one of the 3 from our organization invited to the White House. I call up my wife. I said, guess where I'm going tomorrow? Where? I'm going to the White House. He said, bring me back 2 cheese subs. You can tell where her mind was. Anyway, one of the things I learned over the years as a reporter was to keep it short, and I will. Marciarose, I got to tell you, the great Tom Fox, who was one of the great writers for the Daily News, once described you, you've heard this before, as having limousine legs. She still looks great. She still looks great. I'll tell you. I just want to wrap it up by saying, you talk about a dream job working at Channel 3 and News Radio for that matter. My first brush with broadcasting was when I picked up my green Schwinn and rode up 16th Street from 16th and Mifflin, where I grew up, parked it out front of WCAU Radio at 1620 Chestnut. Actually, you could leave a bike then in those days without the chain. Ran upstairs with my autograph book and got George Thomas and Bill Hart to sign my autograph book. Now, you talk about a dream job later on, working at one of the top stations. What can I tell you? As a kid from South Philly, I'm very, very, very grateful. Thank you.
You're terrific. Next, I want to talk to you about Dick Standish. He was an ace political reporter for Channel 3, which he joined in 1979. And that was after nearly 12 years as a reporter with KYW News Radio. And he scooped up lots and lots of awards for his very insightful reporting. And I want to talk to him afterwards about what he feels is going to happen in this campaign. Dick Standish.
One of the things I always wondered about when producers like Peggy Giordano would tell me brevity is a virtue. I have couple of things to tell you about today. The first live shot I did, once they transferred me over to Channel 3, I'd done about maybe 8,000 or 9,000 in news radio, but obviously it was much different. And I asked the photographers, could we by any chance take and tape under the lens the name of the 2 criminal suspects in the story, just make sure I got them right. Nope. Needs a 3rd man, a stage manager. So, needless to say, unfortunately, in my opinion, things have changed a lot since then. The news director who hired me, Carolyn Ween, I was a big, big fan of hers. I think she was one of the first, if possibly the first, woman news director at a major station in the country, I believe. And what she was interested in, she said, she wanted her reporters to basically be seen as friendly individuals. The viewers would see them. There's my friend so-and-so. What's he going to tell me about today? Now, it wasn't quite that simple. It was a lot more sophisticated than it sounds, but you got the gist of it. She was looking for people who'd be unique. You might remember what they were involved in. Probably the single person who was most unique, who we haven't mentioned yet today, was just a hair in front of me. Marciarose obviously knew him very, very well. His initials were Tom Snyder. And you watched Tom, and you just didn't know what's going to happen next. And it often did. That was the case. One story I heard, I didn't see it, Tom had said something on the air about Manayunk and snakes in Manayunk. In those days, Manayunk was like saying Brooklyn or New Jersey for New Yorkers, you know. So management, this might be true. Okay.
You never knew.
Right. Management tells him they basically need him to get involved in an apology to Manayunk. They'd had so many phone calls. So Tom goes with a crew out to Manayunk, and he's going to shoot his remarks out, you know, on the scene. And he's on camera for a walking stand-up. So he starts out, and the shot is kind of tight. It's in here, but as he's coming along to you, the shot is widening out in Manayunk. And you begin to realize that it just so happens he is in a street with debris and trash. And the thing that had been so offensive at first about Manayunk, he was joking about snakes in Manayunk. So Tom's coming along, and he's saying, we're talking about snakes in Manayunk the other day. We came to Manayunk. Frankly, the shot's widening. We didn't see any snakes at all. Did see a few rats. Good night for the Eyewitness news team. And, you know, we had so many people with so much impact. Matt Quinn, who always asked the question that had to be asked. On and on and on. The one thing, going back, Trudy, I couldn't agree with you more about salute to everybody we worked with. It was a team, and you know, your warden, Dick Sheeran, obviously was a unique talent by himself. But when you took somebody like that, you teamed him up with Dave Neal over there, and a photographer, say like Milt Becker or something, it built. Mike Strug, he's always this hurricane of creativity, but they put him with Irv Grodsky and Bobby Strauss, and they had Car 3 going. And the individual parts were fantastic, but once you had the team working, it was something else. A lot of hard work through the years. Almost always, in my opinion, some very impressive anchors working hard when they just as easily could have had it written for them by somebody. There was a time, one of the most popular questions on the street, if you're out covering stories, was, does Yuki have a girlfriend? And if you wanted to see Yuki Washington at 7:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning, at least when I worked there, it was one place to catch up with him. He'd be at his desk in the Channel 3 newsroom, previewing his tape, adjusting his copy, and he'd be there because he, would be distracted during the week. And we've had a lot of people in that vein. You want to talk about broadcast writing, pacing, production. Nobody better than, say, a Pat Shiraki, for sure. Election nights coming up, Diane Allen would grab me, and we would sit for 2 or 3 hours going over what these possible outcomes were, some of the co-conspirators, and Diane would be there writing away, and the hard work ended up with results. Once in a while, we had the opposite side, not to make it all like, wow, Eyewitness News. This is something Bill Green told me one time. Jim Gardner and Larry Kane would call over to the mayor's office trying to use their anchor clout to get some little tidbit from the mayor. Needless to say, he was pretty closed-mouthed. I don't think they got too many tidbits, but that's another story. So he's over at Channel 3 one night, And he's getting into the elevator at the same time as one of our temporary, non-legendary anchors. And they get in. So this is Greeny's story. You know, he's telling his story. He says, he's standing there. This other individual, he's standing there. They're going up. Finally, they get up near the third floor. The door is getting ready to open. The mayor goes, Bill Green, mayor of Philadelphia. So that anchor didn't have any teleprompter that day, but he learned his lesson. That was the rarest of the rare. Usually everything went so much better. We were so lucky those years. We ended up breaking the story. The mayor would not run for re-election, did a lot of things on Wilson Good versus Frank Rizzo, extensive polling, the NBC polling unit. Well, that's generous, Marciarose. I had a piece of them. I was so lucky with all the people we worked with. And two names from the long, long ago who created a 5-hour wall-to-wall election night wrap, including this NBC material and the rest of it. The news director was Bill Yeager, and the executive producer, she's been over in news radio for 25 or 30 years, running the place in the morning. Lori Lipton was the executive producer. So I do have a few more remarks, but maybe my only bottom line again is I was very, very lucky, and I salute especially all the people I was lucky enough to work with, since many of them save my butt almost every single day. So.
You know, the thing about Dick is he was very, very lucky. He was also very, very good. Our next rememberer is Ray Murray. And you may not recognize Ray when he comes up. He doesn't have his mustache anymore. Ray was the Emmy Award-winning co-host of Evening Magazine at KYW for 10 years. From 1979 until 1992, and then when he left, he founded a production company called Banyan Productions, which is still alive and well and doing very, very well these days with, I think he told me, 42 shows on a variety of cable networks. Here's one not very well-known fact about Ray. Once for a whole year, Ray studied for the priesthood. And when, in the course of his reporting, it just so happened that he had a chance to meet the Pope, you know, he was all a Twitter, and he was, as you would know, very terrifically prepared, but he was also very overwhelmed by the moment. And the apocryphal story at Channel 3 is that he saw the Pope, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Hi, Pope." Ray Murray.
Actually, I was saying goodbye to the Pope. He had my hands, and he was saying, "Thank you for coming to the Vatican." And I said, "Thanks, Pope." It was ridiculous. I will be very brief. My love affair with Channel 3 began in the 60s when I was just a kid growing up in Southern California, and I would ride my bike as fast as I could home from school every day because I could not miss the Mike Douglas show. I had to see the Mike Douglas show. I wanted to be Mike Douglas. And so when they took me to my office on my first day in 1979 at Channel 3, they took me to the office and said, "This was Mike Douglas's office." I was, dang, this is a good way to start. And then, as you begin to be incorporated into the station, you hear names of the alumni like Tom Snyder and Andrea Mitchell and Jessica Savage, and you hear about the groundbreaking careers of Marciarose and Trudy. You begin to realize this is not an ordinary television station. This is a very special place, and it was intimidating and exhilarating at the same time. I was there from 79 to 92, and it was really a period of great transformation, a wonderful time period, because at the beginning of that, we'll call it the 80s, you know, it was uncluttered by cable. You know, if you did a 9 rating and a 23 share, it was a mediocre day. You know, it was just like mediocre at best, right? It was so great. And then, you know, the technology was changing so rapidly. Cameras were getting lighter and smaller, and it meant you could go anywhere. And that really was the secret sauce of what I did for a living for 12 years. And that was, we went everywhere. We traveled the world. My job description was travel the world, meet interesting people, and do stories on them. And it was the greatest gig in television. You know, 20 years before anybody heard the name reality television, we were doing stories about extraordinary people doing ordinary things and ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And when you think about it, it kind of defines what today's reality programming is all about. But what really was special, and I will always give a credit to Channel 3 for at the time, was not just what we were doing on Evening Magazine. And by the way, it would be wrong for me not to say that I did that show alongside 4 really outstandingly talented women, including Nancy Glass and the incredible Pat Shiraki. And it was just the greatest gig ever. Yeah, Pat's amazing. And so what was really incredible, I said I'd be brief, I'm moving this along, was the commitment to local programming. It was just amazing. I mean, we had 25 people on our staff. We had People Are Talking with Maury Povich. He did okay. And we had a teen show called Check It Out, which is interesting today because that show was hosted by this kid named Tom Wheeler, who this year was nominated for an Academy Award because he wrote the movie Puss in Boots. We had this really wild show called Saturday Night Dead. It was a horror movie show with Karen Scioli, phenomenally talented, right? So really, the 80s were just the best time to work at Channel 3, and I will forever be grateful to that station for giving me just an overwhelming experience. I do want to quickly give props to 2 people that influenced me a lot, and I kind of like just watch them. And now, through the prism of being a producer, I can really appreciate what great talent they were. One was Malcolm Poindexter. I watched him on TV. The nicest, too nice for television. He was the nicest person I have ever met, and the great, solid journalism skills. And the other was Dick Sheeran. Dick, man, I'm telling you, man, I would sit at home, I would sit in the office, and you could light up that screen. Man, you lit it up, dude. It was awesome, and I really appreciate you. You're just terrific. Just terrific on the air. I'll leave you with one story. So many things happened to me. So much stuff. Met the Pope and interviewed Princess Grace and flew a plane by myself. So many things. And so people say, well, what's the funniest story? I think, well, there is one funny story, and I wouldn't tell it. There's a lot of funny stories, millions. But one of my favorites, and I wouldn't tell it if we didn't laugh about it for many years, but they hired Steve Bell to come to the network, right? Big ABC, big Huda, big ABC anchor. So they're trying to figure out how to introduce him to Philadelphia, and they said, well, let's have him co-anchor the first hour of the Mummers Parade. We'll introduce him at the Mummers Parade, right? with me, right? Well, that really pissed me off because that was I love the Mummers. The Mummers was my show. That was my gig, right? It's a talent thing. And to add salt to the wound, they said, well, he's going to take first cue. Oh, that just was really pissing me off, right? So I said, okay. So, we're on the air. We're getting ready to go on the air. And they go, 5, 4, 3... Steve says, what a beautiful day for a parade in Chicago. Ray? I just looked at him, and he went, what? Anyway, thank you, Channel 3, for everything you gave to me. You guys were wonderful. Have a great day, and love you very much.
Delightful. She doesn't diagnose, she doesn't prescribe, she doesn't operate, but she is one of the most highly regarded and knowledgeable medical information practitioners in Philadelphia, and of course, she's Stephanie Stahl. And Stephanie became Channel 3's medical reporter in 1992, and she's raked up an incredibly formidable list of awards and commissions and Emmys and the works. She's really very good. I will personally always be very grateful to her for the very, very sensitive reporting she did on autism. Stephanie?
Well, thank you. In this group, I'm a bit of a newbie. I've been at KYW for 20 years. And when you're only 29, that's kind of a feat. People say, you know, what kind of memories do you have? And in this ever-changing world of broadcasting we have, so much changes so often. But there's one question that I always get for all these years, and all these years of covering hard news and then medical news for a decade now. You think people want to know about cures for cancer, the best diet. The question that viewers ask me most is, who does my hair? And number two is, what color is that lipstick? So while things change a lot in our business, some things never change. Thanks, it's great being here.
Jim Donovan, where are you, Jim? Is the multiple Emmy Award-winning consumer reporter for Channel 3 with his very popular 3 on Your Side segment. He always cares so much about the stories he does, and he puts himself into those stories, and his colleagues report that it drives him crazy to see people waste money. And they say, as an example, he brown bags his lunch to work every day. Jim?
And when I heard they were giving away free lunch today, that's why I'm here. Yes, I saved. I have to say, this is a little formidable here. I'm looking around at all of these people that for years I always heard stories about, and I hear stories about in the newsroom, and I kind of feel like I'm back in high school as a freshman when I snuck into the upperclassmen lounge. I'm originally from New York City, born and raised, worked in New York television for a number of years before moving around in the business. And when I worked in New York, a lot of folks had come through Philadelphia, and I always heard about these wonderful people, Marciarose, Trudy, Dick Sheeran, these icons of television in Philadelphia. And I thought, boy, that must be a great place to work. New York had anchors and reporters, but these folks were legends. And Eyewitness News, this is where it all began. So 9 years ago, when KYW called me and asked me if I was interested in joining the station, it kind of took me by surprise. I hadn't sent in any tapes. I didn't know there was an opening. And I thought, what the heck, let's see what's going on there. Obviously, it's an amazing station with a very rich history. You'd be surprised, though, of my reaction the first day at work. You see, I never got to see the place. And this is towards the back end of 5th and Market, towards the last few years that we were there. When I came in for my interview with the general manager, I was brought up to his office and then brought right out to the cab and sent to the airport. My first day actually getting to look at the place was my first day at work. And I remember it was a dreary January day, and I walked into the lobby, and Phil was standing there at the security desk, which was all scraped up. And I sat on the faux leather benches in the lobby as a homeless man banged on the front door of the station, screaming something about Action News. And I remember thinking, something's terribly wrong here. And then they brought me up to the newsroom, the sad newsroom with its dirty beige carpet and fading walls, and I sat down at the conference table waiting to be introduced, and a producer sat down next to me and her chair collapsed. And it wasn't because she was large, it was just a really old chair. And the rest of the meeting, I looked at the wall, there was a stain, and I was trying to figure out if it was ketchup or blood. No one would really tell me what it was. And then I thought, okay, it has to get better than this. And they bring me to my desk at Eyewitness News. And it looked like it had been retrieved from a landfill. And the phone was from an exhibit at Watergate, with the push button, big clunky thing. And I looked out onto the street and I thought, oh my God, I've made a terrible mistake. And I called my agent when everyone had walked away from their desks, and I had to dial 5 digits to get an outside line. I thought, what am I, in Russia? Who dials 5 digits to get an outside? And I got him on the phone, and I said, what have you done to me? I thought you were my friend. And he just laughed. Obviously, he knew his 10% was guaranteed at that point. And he said, look, the place is built on an Indian burial ground. The facility is horrible, but the people, they're just great. He said, breathe in, suck it up, I'll call you in a week. And he hung up the phone. And I sat at my desk, and I tried to make the best of the first day. And as I was leaving the building, I was standing at the elevator bank again trying to figure out what kind of dried food was on the wall. And one of our editors, Charlene Horn, came up to me. And she must have looked at me and realized something's wrong with this guy. And she gave me a big hug and said, "Welcome to CBS 3. The place is nutty, but the people are just great." So it was the second time I heard that day. So I went to my temporary apartment up on JFK Boulevard, and I walked in the apartment, didn't even turn on the light. I had my overcoat on, went straight to the refrigerator, pulled out a bottle of wine. I sat in the dark looking out the window and drank an entire bottle of Chardonnay thinking, how is this going to work? How's this going to work? For one short moment, I contemplated jumping out the window, but it only opened up this much. I later found out that KYW people had lived in that apartment, so I figured, well, maybe management did that for a reason. So the next day I went back to work, and day 2 was better than day 1. And day 3 was better than day 2. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, I'm working with Tom Lamaine. I can call Dick Standish, my colleague. I'm sitting on an anchor desk next to Mark Howard. I'm working at arm's length away from Stephanie Stahl. And I started realizing legends aren't made because of a building, some place on 5th and Market. It was the people that are the legends. And I'm just so thrilled to be part of KYW and the fabric of the story of that TV station and such wonderful people and wonderful histories. I'm just honored to be in this company. Thanks for allowing me to be here.
That's why 3 is on his side. One day, about maybe 6 years ago, I was watching a promotional piece about a new young woman who was being added to the early morning staff at KYW. She was beautiful, she was warm, she was engaging. And I called my husband, I said, watch her, she's going to become a star. And she did. That was Susan Barnett. And 2 years later, she was not just doing the morning stuff, she was anchoring, as she has done since then. She is now co-anchoring the 5, the 6, the 10, and the 11. I don't know, are there any more hours in the day? Susan. Oh, and I should add that she is still beautiful and still warm and still engaged.
Wow. Well, coming from someone like Marciarose, that makes my career, really. So thank you, Marciarose. I wish I could just get up here and say what he said. Jim Donovan, he was pretty spectacular. You know, Marciarose is 100% accurate. I came to CBS 3 6 years ago, and I sat down at the morning anchor desk. And since then, I've had the privilege of, as you all know, having a front row seat for some really incredible news stories over just a short 6 years for me. Unprecedented violence against police officers in the city of Philadelphia. The Phillies winning the World Series in 2008. We elected, woohoo! A lot of people probably remember covering it in 1980 too, I'm sure. We've elected our first African-American president. We've had a record-breaking winter of 2010 where we had non-stop, round-the-clock coverage for record snowfall amounts. Also, Hurricane Irene, where Chris May and I had the privilege of sitting on the anchor desk for 12 hours straight, just telling people what to expect from weather that we're not really very used to getting around here. So that's been a privilege and an honor that I'm just really lucky to have. But what I have to say is in the short 6 years that I've been here, this business, I think, has changed dramatically. And I think the most visible way that that has happened is with the emergence of social media. I mean, we are now required to post on Facebook every day and tweet every day. And we're required to send out a certain number of tweets every day and post on Facebook a certain number of times. And if you don't, you get called out about it. The boss will bring you in and say, Susan, you know, you haven't posted on Facebook in a week and a half. What's going on? I mean, that's just all a part of the way we're reaching viewers now. And it's really every bit as important as the broadcast that we're putting on the air. And it's really changed a lot of things. I mean, just imagine back in the day tweeting at Dick Standish, or at Marciarose, or at Big Al Meltzer, or Big Al Meltzer posting a status update. Big Al Meltzer is big. Or, you know, who knows? Marciarose just posted or just logged on to Pinterest. It could happen. So that's really what the industry is becoming now. And to all those people who say, television news or broadcast television is on its way out. I've never bought that, not for a minute. But now as we're getting more into it and we're using social media and integrating it so brilliantly into our broadcasts, I really believe it now. And I know that I was right back when I thought we're not going anywhere. We're just getting bigger. We're getting stronger. And we are making our mark in this industry in such a way. And 80 years is behind us for Channel 3. I think 80 years is in front of us and even more. So I'm proud to be a very small part of it. And I'm so honored to be in the room with all of you here today. So thank you so much.
What a wonderful way to remember and to celebrate Channel 3 on its 80th anniversary. So happy anniversary, Channel 3. And long may you prosper, and maybe 20 years from now, give us even more stories on your 100th anniversary. Thank you very much.